What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguised Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 ANT. In tonight's episode, I am exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, even maybe. We are coming to the end of the draft process. It is draft miss week. The NFL draft will be live 2 nights from now, Thursday, April 27th, and then continuing on Friday, April 28th, Saturday, April 29th. And with the draft about to begin, again, we are coming to the end of the pre-draft process, all the prospect evaluation, the fits, the mock drafts, the discussion, the wants, the needs, the desires, all of those things are starting to come to a close. And in tonight's episode, I wanted to take a bit of a different turn. So much of this pre-draft process has been here on this show and the Cover One channel, rightfully so, has been on the focus of things from the Buffalo Bills perspective. What do you want for the Bills? What do we want for the Bills? Needs, scheme fits, skill sets, positional upgrades, all of these pieces, all from the eyes of the Buffalo Bills and through the lens of what the Buffalo Bills want. So I thought it'd be fun to flip that conversation a bit on its head and look at things in tonight's episode through the eyes of an enemy, through the eyes of an opponent, and see what does a potential Buffalo Bills, team not want the Buffalo Bills to do. Because sometimes in order to find what you need most, it's interesting to see what your enemies want you to do the least. And that can kind of put some things into perspective. And with that being said, I'm going to bring up my guest for tonight's episode. You folks should know he's joined me multiple years now for the Buffalo Bills regular season games against the Kansas City Chiefs, Mr. Matt Lane of the KC Sports Network. And you also contribute to the draft guide that you guys put out as well. You do a bunch of good work covering the Chiefs, covering college prospects. You and I were chopping it up earlier, talking about how exhausted we are as we've come to the finish line here. You're awesome. Thank you for being here. I hate your hat. I hate your shirt, but I like you and respect you. Thanks for being here. Welcome. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. There's these 2 different Super Bowl pairs of merchandise fit real well still. They're like pretty recent. They're new. We got one from like last year, then a couple years ago.
It's just like, which one do I want to wear? Like the first
I just
one
wear
or
all.
the second one?
I mean, there's, maybe I have some of the knockoffs from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost to. That might be somewhere sitting in a closet. No, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy coming on. We are busy during this time, like everybody is. And like I do work on a draft guide. We have KCSN stuff that I got going on. It's like I'm usually pretty busy. I don't do a lot of other podcasts just because we have so much going on. My voice gets tired. I have a little bit of a farm. Like I get, there's a lot going on in my life. And but when you ask me, I'm always ready to come on here. I love coming on here and hanging out with the Bills, my Bills friends / enemies here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words. You are genuinely one of my favorite people that I've ever had on the show. Which is weird because like I hate you so much and about like just everything about you. And I am planning, like we talked about on Twitter last week, like I am going to try and take over your farm with some of the farm takeover strategies that you talked about last week.
True.
Justice will be swift and it will be served. But I digress. This episode, so I mentioned in the intro, I thought it was a cool concept to have because again, like everything is always so focused on whoever covers what team. It's always like, what does our team need? Whether it's you're looking at from, the team perspective, what you think they will do or what I want them to do, so on and so forth. So I thought it'd be cool to flip things on its head a little bit again and look at things from an enemy perspective, because I think that kind of puts different needs and team building pieces into perspective when you see, okay, this is what I think we need to do. But what do your opponents think? And does that maybe lead you in that direction? Like if you've got your opponents and they're like, well, we definitely don't want them to do this. It's like, interesting. Like maybe I didn't think of that or I didn't see it that way. So we're going to dive into ranking some things tonight from the perspective of Buffalo Bills opponents. So obviously Matt has the perspective of the Kansas City Chiefs, who are a team that most Bills fans don't like in any which way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, I thought Matt's perspective as a person who analyzes and covers the Kansas City Chiefs, knows the ins and outs and X's and O's of their team and of football, combined with his draft prowess and knowledge, would be an awesome guest for tonight. And Matt, before we dive into that rankings piece and the focus on the draft, I just want to ask you kind of a general leading question. So the Chiefs, as your merchandise on your head and torso indicates, won the Super Bowl once again. Yeah, you're really healing it up. I hate it, but I respect it so much. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl again this past year, the second in the Reid-Mahomes regime. They are once again atop the AFC throne and the NFL throne. When you look at the Buffalo Bills, one of several teams that have Super Bowl aspirations and realistic odds and chances to win a Super Bowl, but they are chasing the Kansas City Chiefs. When you look at the Buffalo Bills, as things stand currently, how far away do you think they are from potentially dethroning the Kansas City Chiefs? We've seen back-to-back regular seasons from these past couple of years. The Bills have beaten Kansas City in Kansas City. We all know what happened in that stupid playoff game 2 years ago. They did not meet in the playoffs this year.
Wait, what happened? Can you tell me?
No, it's
Okay.
no, it's it's
Okay.
I can't even make a joke. I'm still like too hurt. You're a jerk. The Bills, you know, we had that bit of like a budding rivalry, I think, between the Chiefs and Bills, although the playoffs will ultimately decide it. Where do you see this Buffalo Bills team? How far away do you think they are from potentially knocking the Chiefs off of the mountaintop?
Okay, so this, I've healed it up a little bit, got my jokes off, but now it's time to pander back to the crowd, right? I still personally see the Bills kind of as the biggest challenger to the Chiefs going forward.
Okay.
Bengals, very good team. They obviously did get the Chiefs in the playoffs 2 years ago. They beat them in the regular season again last year. Like they have the 3-1 record versus the Chiefs over the last couple of years, but when we still go up and match up against the Bengals, it seems like they live on such thin margins that I still have all the confidence in the world when the Chiefs and the Bengals play, the Chiefs are going to win. And just the Bengals' path to beating the Chiefs seems so narrow all the time that I just can't believe it keeps happening. Whereas the Bills, on the other hand, yeah, it's still the Chiefs are always going to have a narrow path to lose a game, right? They're a good football team, so it's always going to be hard. But I can see the Chiefs go in and play the Bills and give an A- game and still lose because the Bills A+ game beats them. The Bills A game will still beat them at that point in time. They can play almost equally, and the Bills have enough talent. They have a quarterback that has enough talent that they can beat the Chiefs, who play a very good game. I think every other AFC team needs the Chiefs to play a poor or a mediocre game to beat them. The Bills are right there. I do think the issue the Bills have run into with the Chiefs in the playoffs, or even the Bengals or whoever it may be in the playoffs these past couple of years, when it comes that crunch time, and I don't just mean like, high pressure or just generally high pressure situations, it seems like they are no longer playing their best football all the time when that comes up, whether offensively, defensively, a specific player, the coaches, whoever it may be. It seems like that pressure just builds up and it becomes just a little bit too much. I think they just need to get over that hump one time and that all changes. But until they get there, that just mounts and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually you either got to get over it or you unfortunately come up against kind of a reset to figure out how you get there.
Yeah, you either kind of break that piece a little bit and the pressure dissipates, or it continues to mount and build and it crushes you underneath the weight of it. And that's a very real thing. I think that's very well said. And it's something that I've echoed, I think, out loud verbally on the show or on Twitter, or at least in my mind. Like, yeah, it just seems that whether it's the moment from like a large scale, like the Bengals game as a whole, or the detailed small scale moment, like 13 seconds, which you were so kind to bring up and remind us of because you're such a gentleman. Like those, whether it's the small scale niche moment or the large scale piece, like, we see it you see it in movies and storylines, and you see it in real sports. Like, it's not just for entertainment or to write articles or draw drama or storylines. Like, the pressure is a real thing and it manifests physically on the field, whether in plays that are called or decisions that are made or execution on the field. And it just seems like, for whatever reason, in those crunch time moments in the playoffs, yeah, the Bills have kind of faltered a little bit. And against a team like the Chiefs, like I like the margin for error comment you made about the Bills, because what makes the Chiefs so hard to beat year in and year out is because you have Patrick Mahomes, because you have Andy Reid and Travis Kelce, and then the playmakers that they have on defense. Your margin for error against them is so small. I mean, even take the Jags for a little bit. I'm not sitting here saying the Jags were going to beat the Chiefs, but you drop that interception that Chad Henne maybe gifted to you when Patrick Mahomes goes out, like, and then you fumble down like inside the low red zone against the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs are in that spot now where almost any mistake, you just feel like, well, you know what? We did everything right 9 out of 10, but that one thing we did is the reason we didn't win the game. And they make the margin for error so small. And it's why they're so frustrating.
Well, I think the hard part too is from the Bills standpoint too, like you're talking about these big picture games or minor, not even minor, but like small details. But now I think it's transitioning to team building in general, right? Like now there's this pressure that the Bills are having of trying to essentially chase the Chiefs, right? I don't want to say this be cocky, but like everyone's chasing the Chiefs again right now, and especially in the AFC. You can't, if you're in the Bills' shoes, you can't just build a team to only beat the Chiefs because now the Bengals have caught up. And so the team that can beat the Chiefs might not beat the Bengals, or the team that can beat the Chiefs might not beat the Dolphins or whoever else is coming, right? But you still have to also beat the Chiefs. And then you go back to that margin of error thing. If you build a team that's okay, like it's a really good team, but not centered around just beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, which is a different task, how does that play out in the playoffs? It's like now the Bills have to find out how they want to build their team while chasing another team with other good teams. Like I'm saying the word team 800 times here, but it just kind of becomes this crazy circle of like, how do you chase one team that you clearly have to get over the hump against while not letting everybody else catch up to you? And so now it goes back to there's pressure in team building. Bill's done a very good job building their team, right? But it feels like this draft's kind of big for you guys, just in terms of adding young talent to this team, and not even just young talent, but like getting guys that are just solid, like just getting guys that can go out there and play. Maybe not necessarily. I don't know. You can tell me. Do you guys want big splashes? Do you just want a solid group of guys that can play early? Like, I don't know the best path for them, but it just feels like they need to have a big draft this year.
This draft is super important, not just for 2023, but for 2024 and beyond. The Bills are now in that territory that any team with a franchise quarterback gets into, where you pay the franchise quarterback and now you have to get that cheap, effective talent, usually via the draft, to be able to maintain functionality and have a solid floor at all your positions across as many spots as you can, offensively and defensively. And the Bills have significant questions. I've talked about it all offseason on this show. Like right now, they have no defensive tackles on the roster for 2024. And that's not great for a team that is primarily driven defensively by their defensive line. Like they've had some questions at offensive line that I think they raised the floor for. You've got some questions at wide receiver. We might be doing this dance at safety again next year if Micah Hyde doesn't come back. There are questions on this roster that it's unfortunate this draft class isn't the strongest, especially at the positions of need for the Buffalo Bills and overall. I don't think this is the draft class to be like, oh, sweet, we can plug all these holes or upgrade all these positions in this draft class. But yeah, this draft and this offseason as a whole was very important to them, not just for 2023, but in terms of setting themselves right going forward as Josh Allen's contract starts to kick in further and further as you go forward. And I also thought, I just wanted to touch on the point you made. When you're chasing, because it was such a great point, when you're chasing the top dog, you still have to make sure you're able to beat the rest of the dogs that are around you. And that ties into my philosophy I always have for team building. Like it's that rock, paper, scissors ability. Like you need to be able to throw all three. You can't just be rock. Because okay, so if the Chiefs are paper and the Chiefs would be scissors. If the Chiefs are scissors and you're rock, sweet, guess what? You smash them all day, you win. What happens if you play a team that's paper? Like what happens if you build a tremendous, coverage unit on defense built to stop the pass? That's what you're going towards. That's where you're going towards. And then, I don't know, you play like the Ravens in the wild card round of the playoffs, and they're like, cool, we're just going to run it 55 times on you and keep the ball away from you, and then you're going to lose. And then it's like, you built this team to beat this one team and you never even got, and that's part, I think, of the pressure point too. Like then you're caught like chasing your tail a little bit because you're trying to beat this one team, but then are you at a disadvantage against the other teams? And okay, does the playoff seeding fall the right way with the way that you're built versus the teams that you play and it's so frustrating and so dumb. And I hate sports, but I also love them. And it's the enigma that is being a sports fan. And especially when you understand and study the X's and O's and the schematic pieces of everything. And for me, like every free agent signing, every roster decision it's all dialed up to like 10 because I feel like I'm seeing the ones and zeros like Neo in the Matrix, and like someone would be like, oh, that guy's okay, and I'm over here like freaking out for like no reason, and it's just I feel that pressure, and I'm not one of the coaches or the GM
Right.
or on the field, like, so imagine what they think, like, in roster building, yeah, especially when that top dog is in your conference or is a rival, like, and you factor in the copycat league and so on and so forth. It really muddies the waters in a whole bunch of ways. I'm stressed, but I'm also excited.
It'd be really cool if the NFC would keep a quarterback or two as well. Like,
Dude,
that would be awesome.
We were talking about it a bit offline. Like the AFC sucked for years when the Patriots were running things. And then the Bills get Josh Allen and the Bills are good, but it's like, no, now Miami's going to be good and the Jets are going to be good. And then they're going to get Aaron Rodgers and the Patriots aren't great, but they're still like good enough. And then there's Patrick Mahomes and there's Justin Herbert and there's Joe Burrow. And then we're over in the NFC being like, who's the best quarterback in the NFC? And it's like Jalen Hurts? Question mark? Like, not that I don't want to take anything away from Jalen Hurts. Like, and I think he deserved the contract he got, but like, I don't know, the five, if we rank the best quarterbacks in the league, they're probably all in the AFC.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think so. And I mean, even beyond that too, just like your best teams, like, yes, the Eagles were a very good team last year. They belonged to the Super Bowl, but after that, and especially with quarterback injuries, but even without, like, how many teams from the AFC would be favored over the 49ers if they were all to be matched up, even at the end of last year, right? Like, the AFC is just loaded.
Even
right
you
now.
take a team like the Niners are sweet, right? But I don't know, like, are they really going to go with Brock Purdy? Like, we don't even know what his arm is going to look like. And then if it's not him, is it Sam Darnold or Trey Lance? Like, granted, the rest of their squad is stacked and really good, but also like that's what you're talking about in the NFC. Or is it the Cowboys? Is it the Eagles? Like, is it the Niners? And then you look at the AFC and it's just this murderer's row of stupidity. And it's just like, that always goes back to like the paranoia that exists in me as like a Bills fan, just like it never works out. Like, there's always something else. Like, you think you turn the corner and you're like, I'm going to escape the haunted house. And then you like turn the corner and you're like, oh no, this is like a hall of mirrors. I have no idea where I am. This sucks. And then you escape that and you're like, sweet. No, now I'm in a labyrinth. Like, where am I? Like, what's going on? It's just, you turn one corner or you go through one door and another roadblock or obstacle emerges. But nonetheless, let's dive into the topic for this episode. The Buffalo Bills 2023 NFL Draft Anti-Wish List. So many things are wish list driven. Oh, I'd like this guy. I'd like to see this position addressed. But again, for this episode, we are flipping that idea on its head a bit. For everybody who's joining us live here, you know how we like to do on the show. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, throw them up into the chat. I will star them, and then once I send Matt on his merry way, I will bring things back up towards the end of the episode. Especially, I want to get all your folks' your anti-wish listings. Maybe it's a specific player you don't want, position, so on and so forth. We'll dive into that on the back end of the episode. But right now, because we're joined by Mr. Matt Lane of the KC Sports Network. Matt, we're going to lead off with your number one. When it's coming to this NFL draft for the Buffalo Bills, what is the top thing, if you are an opponent of the Buffalo Bills, which technically you are, what do you not want to see them do in this draft? Oh, and I should also say for people, I don't know Matt's answers, and they could be position specific. They could be player specific. There's a lot of ways that he could answer this question, a lot of avenues potentially go down. So what's the top thing you do not want to see the Buffalo Bills do? I'm falling apart. Go ahead.
I'm gonna start at the top here, and we're gonna go player specific to start. And it's a guy that I like, and it's a twofold answer here. I don't want to see him on the Bills because I think it makes him a lot better. But I also, if he's available at the Bills pick, I think they should just let him go by so the Chiefs can maybe draft him. Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of USC. I don't know how Bills fans feel about him. I know a lot of people are torn on him because he weighs like 150 pounds, and I get it. I 100% get it. But I love Jordan Addison. I think he walks into the NFL and is able to get open when you need him to get open on all three levels of the field because of his route running, because of how well he understands coverage. I think he gives them that option across from Stephon Diggs that can be reliable. I love Gabe Davis. I would take Gabe Davis on the Chiefs 10 out of 10 times right now, but I don't know if I would call him a guy that's going to reliably be open on any point in time that we have to call his number because our other guy is getting doubled or getting taken out of this game or whatever. I think Addison would give them that guy. And I think the Chiefs really need that guy. I really don't want to see the Bills have two people that start to build that connection with Josh Allen that just get open. The Chiefs were great this past year without Tyreek Hill, but there was still a difference when push came to shove and the offense needed a play, having Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, having two guys that had the utmost confidence from your quarterback in the offense. I don't want to see the Bills get that. And Addison's the one guy that I think walks in like right away and can probably build on that. So please do not take him if he is available.
Is that answer more Jordan Addison driven or more wide receiver weapon driven for you?
Yeah. It's probably 50-50 both. I really do like Addison. So he's my top wide receiver.
I thought as soon as you started talking about like someone you don't want, you'd like to go to the Chiefs, like, because I follow you on Twitter, like I see your timeline. I immediately was like, it's going to be Jordan Addison. So
that's the one. It's like, I would still have the same feeling if it was Zay Flowers or if for whatever reason, Jackson Smith and Jigba fell that far. But it would be more prominent to me if it was Jordan Addison. I think he'll play in the outside of the NFL. No, you don't want to slap him, on the line of scrimmage for 100% of his snaps and have him go beat a corner. But if you keep him off the line of scrimmage or you just have him do it occasionally, I don't think it'll be a problem. So yeah, it's mostly it's position driven, but the player being Addison, being ready right away, beating man, beating coverage, it just amplifies it. And it makes it that much more because you give the Bills Quentin Johnston even, or Zay Flowers. I think he adds more dynamic ability to the team. That's really good. It makes them better. But I still wonder if you come back to that same reliability or consistency issue that it feels like they're missing outside of Stephon Diggs.
Is he your wide receiver one in this draft class?
He is, and part of that is slanted towards the Chiefs a little bit because I do think that they need that reliability. So like, and then like for JSN specifically, I push him down just a tiny bit because I think he is pretty exclusive to operating in the same space Travis Kelce is. And not that that's a bad thing. It's just that does impact the rankings a little bit. So Addison is my wide receiver one though right now.
One more question for you around wide receiver pieces. We've seen what Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid by extension have done. Well, granted, maybe the sample size is a bit smaller because it was really just this past year, but the idea of them being able to take guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster and I guess Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore to a degree, but the whole idea of if you've got that great trigger man, you can just drop in little pieces here and there, and that trigger man like Mahomes or Allen or whoever can raise the game of those pieces that you've dropped in and kind of make everything fit. Do you see, we were talking offline a bit about Mahomes and Allen and how good Allen is and how good Mahomes is. Do you see Allen as that guy that you can kind of just drop in any weapon around him and he can raise their game? Or do you think he needs more player specific skill set pieces than Mahomes does? And if by so, how much, you know what I'm kind of getting at there.
Yeah. I'm going to say right now, just because we haven't seen him go through the full wholesale change that we just had to see Mahomes go through over the past 2 years. And Mahomes has completely revamped how he played the game when he first started starting in 2018 and 2019 to where he is now. So like he's kind of been forced to do it. So we've seen him do that. And then we saw him do it with all new pieces. We haven't really had to see Josh Allen do that yet. And it does seem like the times where he does start to struggle the most is when what he does well is taken away. Now, I still love Josh Allen because he's like, hey, you want to take away my deep ball? That's fine. I'm just going to throw it even deeper. And it works. And like, that's awesome. I wish Mahomes did that more. That's actually one thing I do wish that he did. But I do think Allen needs guys that are a little bit more specific to his skill set right now, or at least we haven't seen him do it with guys that are just kind of being dropped in and put out there and then saying, okay, Josh, we need you to make this work now. It's now on you. It's your problem to make this work. Go figure it out. And not as a punishment, just as we believe you can do it. Let's see you do it. I just don't know if we've gotten there yet.
Very fair. Very fair. Good answer. I knew this would lead to, each one of your answers would lead to like questions that I would have in like the organic conversation. I'm pretty happy with that first answer. It's funny, you mentioned how Bills fans feel about Jordan Addison. I think for Bills fans, the holy grail of receivers to fall would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think a lot of it is due to that slot nature that he plays, or that he works in. Just we saw the Bills offense look and feel different this past year without the presence of a legitimately dominant slot receiver like a Cole Beasley. Like Beasley's ability to leverage space and read coverage and be able to understand what's happening from the changes from pre to post snap and be able to do all of that quickly and accurately and on the same level and plane as Josh Allen. I thought that was a big, hindrance to Josh Allen's performance last year because he didn't have that safety net and that reliability piece, in the middle of the field and in that slot. And Jax operates in that world. He's very comfortable. He's got some size on him. He's got that athleticism. He is, I think, kind of priority number one for the Bills. I think Addison's in that second tier, depending on who you ask. Jackson, I think, is in a tier of his own. And then it's Addison, Zay Flowers, and Josh Downs, the slot receiver from North Carolina, that are Bills fans' darlings. Downs, again, he reminds people of Cole Beasley with how he runs his routes and paces. And so I think you kind of put him into that role. Bills fans really want that slot piece, but there's some sexiness to Zay Flowers. Addison was the ideal one. And I think a lot of people got scared off because he weighs, 110 pounds soaking wet. But to your point, when you watch the tape, really polished, good route runner. Like, I think he can succeed on the outside, even though his frame and size might be he kind of need to work inside. But I mean, you pair him with a Stephon Diggs, with how Addison already operates as a route runner and his understanding of leverage and finding space and ability to beat man and zone. That's a very interesting combination in terms of what you can do to help him potentially get to his ceiling even further. So good answer to start off. I like it.
JSN for the Bills makes a ton of sense, right? Because the outside receivers are set. Diggs can play inside, but I think he's been a lot more productive when he's outside.
Yes, absolutely.
Gabriel Davis obviously is an outside guy, so you have those guys kind of set up. Yes, Dawson Knox lives over the middle a little bit, but not still in the same way. So JSN being the top guy for the Bills, I would 100% agree with that. That would be also very scary. I just don't think he'll be there. So Same. I left him completely off, right? So I went to the next guy on the list.
No, absolutely. And the receiver class is weird in general in terms of how it's going to fall. Even Quentin Johnson, who you mentioned, before the draft process started, it was well, this dude's 6'4", he's going to run a 4.4, and then he's 6'2" and he runs a 4.51, and then you watch the on tape stuff and how high cut he is, and he doesn't high point the football, he's a body catcher, all these other things. But this wide receiver class is so weird. I wonder how it falls. I don't think Jax has any shot of making it to the Bills at 27. And I wonder who the first non-Jackson Smith and Jigba receiver is off the board. Is it Zay Flowers? Is it Jordan Addison? You've got a team like the Giants sitting right in front of the Bills. If they get their pick, do they lean Flowers? I think Addison makes sense, but they could use Flowers. It's really interesting in terms of trying to see where the receivers are going to fall, because so much of it, given the skill set and frame of the receivers in this class, is so team specific. Even Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? So a lot of people have him as their wide receiver one. Well, I don't know, if a team doesn't need a slot receiver or doesn't run a bunch of 11 personnel, is he their wide receiver one? And if they want more of a guy who can live more on the outside and push things further into the boundary, where does he fall? Is he your wide receiver 3, 4? Even though his talent might be better, where do you rank him? The team fit combined with the sizes and frames of all these guys make it such a muddied class. I hate this wide receiver class. I hate it absolutely. It's just everybody's 5'6" and 160 pounds, slot guys. Maybe they could play some Z. The only true X guys you have are Johnston and A.T. Perry and maybe Jonathan Mingo and Cedric Tillman, because everyone else is just Smurfs. It's so just muddied and weird in a variety of ways.
And then even all those guys have glaring red flags. Tillman comes from the fake offense, and we just don't talk about it because he's not high. And A.T. Perry's offense might even be more fake than Tennessee's. And then Mingo, I have the least. I can't just poke random holes in his game. He just wasn't that productive. People talk about him in the A.J. Brown level. He just wasn't that guy in college. Not that he can't develop, but he wasn't that guy. But
it's a lot of projection based.
Everyone has so many red flags in this wide receiver class. I don't hate it, but it's really hard to wrap your mind around. You have to be okay with I don't want to say non-complete wide receiver, but just a wide receiver that has issues. That's not a perfect player. You have to be really okay with it if you're going that route.
Yeah, a guy that you really might not see what he can do until year 2 or year 3. Like, you
Yeah.
got to work out some of those kinks. There's not as many. This year's class doesn't have Wilson and London and Jamison Williams and Jahan Dotson, even somebody who I had as like wide receiver 6 for me last year, like Traylon Burks. Like, he had a good rookie year, and like maybe he tops the class this year. Like, it's so wonky and it's so muddy. So very interesting that you went with wide receiver there and your pick of Addison, who I do like as well. So I second your notion there. Let's move to the second. So the number one thing you do not want to see the Buffalo Bills do in this draft is add Jordan Addison, wide receiver from the University of Southern California. What is the number 2 thing you do not want to see the Bills do?
All right, this one less player specific. It's more just like a results based thing. I don't want to see the Bills hit on multiple defensive linemen in like the way the Chiefs did. Okay, and so when I say the Chiefs, I mean like they did it cornerback last year. So if for those that might not be familiar, they drafted Trent McDuffie in round 1.
Oh, they're familiar.
Watson, Joshua Williams in round 5, Jalen Watson in round 7. All of them played very important roles, very specific roles for this team throughout the season, right? So they're not all going to be all-stars. Two of the rookies, the day 3 guys, got picked on in stretches. They weren't perfect players by any means, but they were very good rookies that played a vital part of winning the Super Bowl. They filled specific roles. So the Bills coming out of this draft with 3 defensive linemen, maybe one of them taken in the first round as a 3-down player, plays all the time, has a big impact. We'll call him the Trent McDuffie of defensive linemen. Then we'll say the next guy in day 2 or day 3 there in the middle plays a lot of snaps, but maybe he's only a 1.5 down player, a run plugger that just stuffs a lot of runs that come his way. He's not a perfect player, but very useful. And then they get a round 7 guy that comes in and just provides flashes and splash plays like the Jalen Watson, a couple picks, like 2 straight picks in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Just like all these different levels along the defensive line. They don't all have to be home runs. They just have to be quality players. But the Bills doing that on the defensive line to further bolster the team that kind of started the trend of just having this giant rotation on the D-line, right? I think the Bills were one of the first teams to do it. And now all of a sudden the Eagles are getting all the credit for only playing 3 snaps in a row before subbing guys out. I remember the Bills when the Chiefs were getting ready to gear up for that playoff game 3 years ago. The Bills were like, oh, full-on defensive line rotation. Like getting that cupboard full again would not be fun as a Chiefs fan.
Do you see... So with the Bills' defensive line, where it currently stands right now, you've got Von Miller coming back from injury. You've got, and we're just focused on the edge group right now, like Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau, Boogie Basham, a couple other like young guys that haven't really factored in it as of now. And then on the interior, you've got Daquan Jones, you've got Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips has come back, Tim Settle is back, had a bit of a wonky year. As the defensive line stands now, do you see this group as... Like, how do you, if the Bills and Chiefs are playing right now and you're looking at that Bills defensive line against that Chiefs offensive line, is it a group that poses any type of threat to you, or are you very confident in the Chiefs offensive line against the Bills D line?
I mean, I got to see the Chiefs tackles right now, right? Because it's a little bit up in the air with them replacing both tackles. But just generally speaking, from what I've seen of the Chiefs, it does not strike fear in me. They seem formidable, but they're not a defensive line. When the Chiefs are getting ready to play the Bills, I'm not thinking this is going to be one of those games where Mahomes is going to have to be perfect in the pocket or make a ton of plays with his legs. It's the Bills can do stuff to frustrate them. Somebody can have a good game. We've seen just about all of these guys have good games versus the Chiefs, but I don't think the Bills defensive line has really made their presence supremely felt versus the Chiefs. And so that's where I think just getting even more depth, and it's a deep-ish defensive line group. I think the issue you guys ran into last year, obviously Von Miller getting hurt really, put a big damper on things, right? Like, and you can't predict that, but I can also say he's a veteran player, relying on him for a lot of snaps. You better have backups ready to come in and play in if this does happen again. So just having that depth there to just throw waves of bodies that can be efficient at a certain moment. Maybe now all of a sudden, they're still not taking over the game, but there's never also a point where you don't feel their presence. And I feel like at times the Bills defensive line kind of disappears.
I think it's very well said. And it's something that has resonated with me this entire offseason when I've gone over the metrics, which are, there's a severe drop for the Bills defense as a whole, but especially that defensive line in terms of pass rush productivity and production in general once Von Miller went down. And for a grouping that, Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have both come out and explicitly stated like they believe in building the defense from the defensive line out, and a grouping that's had a top 10 pick recently in Ed Oliver, a first round pick in Greg Rousseau, a second round pick in Boogie Basham, a second round pick in AJ Epinesa, and all the other, defensive line additions through free agency. To have that level of production drop off, Von Miller is tremendous. He's a Hall of Famer. But to have your group disappear, like you said, at times and kind of fall off a cliff just because one guy went out, understandably that one guy is tremendous, but to have that level of production dip despite all the investment that you've had has been a tremendously worrisome thing to me. And I think you nailed it on the head. Like, it's not a group that if you're facing like a good offensive line, you're like, we could probably win this matchup. Like, yeah, they got some guys, but we'll be all right. And I don't think that should not be an offensive group's thought, considering all the investment you've poured into that position group. So very well said. I also wanted to ask you a question. We talked about this offline. The Chiefs corners, you mentioned several of their rookie corners who had good years. They had a tremendous rookie class in general. You have the rookie corners, you have what Karlaftis did, even what you got from Cook at times at safety and what he was able to do. You got, you're getting base personnel reps out of Leo Chenal just because you're just like, hey, let's just have you run as fast as you can and blitz and run into linemen or make plays in the backfield and see what happens. They really used him to his skill set well. But we talked about this offline. This is a thing for Bills fans, and I've said it a bit on the show here, but you are a Chiefs guy, so I want to talk to you about it, and then I'll probably clip it and use it as promo at some point. So many Bills fans are focused on the notion of you have to play rookies, you have to play rookies, you have to play rookies, and they used the Chiefs' success last year because, well, look what the Chiefs did with their rookies, and they won the Super Bowl, and now they're set up for all this success. But talk about, especially in the secondary, talk about why the Chiefs had to rely on those rookies. So yes, they drafted the right players. Those players played well. This is not to take anything away from the draft pick or the selection or the players playing well and executing or the decision to put them in there. The coaches were coaching them up, so on and so forth. But talk about why there was no other option. Like, whether the rookies played well or didn't, they had to play their rookies, especially in the secondary. Like, that's just where their depth chart was and what they had to lean into.
But it's funny because Chiefs fans got really upset at Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, for never playing rookies. Like, right? That's kind of the mantra going into this last year. And the Chiefs were also under fire, specifically talking corners right now, of not investing in the cornerback position. So the Chiefs go into the draft. They have not taken anything above like a day 3 corner under Brett Veach. They haven't signed a corner in free agency for more than like $3 million per year under Brett Veach. The whole joke is they don't value corner at all. They trade up for Trent McDuffie. They then draft 3 more cornerbacks throughout the rest of the draft. So you go into training camp and the competition is L'Jarius Sneed, who's going to start, Rashad Fenton, who is a day 3 pick from 3 years ago, who's always just been fine. He's always kind of been like a 4th corner that gets some reps to start when someone gets hurt. They brought in, I'm going to forget, Lonnie Johnson from the Houston Texans to be competing for a job. The year before, they had Mike Hughes. We saw how well that went in the playoffs. They didn't bring him back. Like, they didn't have corners. They had a bunch of journeyman corners or homegrown guys that were day 3 picks that were vying for starting jobs. So Trent McDuffie comes in as a first-round pick. Yeah, he's probably going to start in week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals because his only competition is really other rookies and then Lonnie Johnson, who has been kicked around from corner to safety to corner to safety. And so as the year went on, Trent McDuffie gets hurt. Lonnie Johnson gets cut. Rashad Fenton's banged up a little bit. Well, guess who has to start now? The day 3 rookies are now thrust in there. Then the Chiefs, in their ultimate wisdom, decide we will trade Rashad Fenton. So that way, I don't know what the rationale is. We joked that it was so that they had to keep playing rookies who were playing well and not put him back on the field. But they trade away the most proven, the most tenured guy in that CB room. And now you are forced to play L'Jarius Sneed and rookies. That's legitimately their only options besides special teamers. And that's the way it shook out. And even these other guys you talk about with Brian Cook, Leo Chenal, the Chiefs just didn't have players at those positions. I mean, coming off of John Dorsey to Brett Veach, that was something the Chiefs lacked, was depth under John Dorsey. And Brett Veach has slowly been building depth at certain positions. But when you have to rebuild an offensive line unit, when you have to rebuild a wide receiver room, you take a stall. You stall out a little bit, adding depth. They had no depth in the secondary. They had no depth at some of these positions they drafted, so rookies had to play. So yes, they earned the job over other depth guys, but they weren't beating out proven starters. They weren't beating out even bottom tier starters. They were beating out other journeyman players for those reps.
Thank you so much. Thank
I
you.
hope that helps.
It does help tremendously. The big one that it like we talked about offline that it comes back to is, people wanted Kyrie Elam playing ahead of Dane Jackson. And the thing that I had was Dane Jackson didn't have as bad of a year that people think he did. He was in like the top third of the league in a bunch of different metrics, efficiency metrics. And Elam had some struggles as well. But my whole contention was the Chiefs didn't have a Dane Jackson at corner. Like all their guys their Dane Jackson was a whole bunch of rookies. So it was like, here you go, sink or swim. And they swam, which is, again, awesome for them. And the identification from the scouts and the GMs or the GM and, identifying who they wanted in the draft, and the coaches were getting them coached up. But yeah, whether they liked it or not, like that's who they were rolling with. It wasn't a conscious decision to go in and be like, what we're going to do this year? All rookies. We're going to have all these rookies making impacts. And it was like, no, the board kind of fell that way. And then they had to thrust these guys into that role. I appreciate you so much. I appreciated you before this show started.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you even more now. So
Perfect.
We led off with not wanting the Bills to add Jordan Addison because of what he adds to this team. Your second point was the Bills adding some reinforcements on that defensive line, which you did not want to see them do. Now let's go to point number 3 out of 5. What is the third thing you do not want to see the Buffalo Bills do in this upcoming draft?
Let's go back to the offensive side.
Okay.
Let's say land a day 3 offensive lineman that kind of walks into a starting role immediately, and not because there's no competition, but just because he's that good. So, I mean, like the Chiefs I don't want to bring everything back to the Chiefs, but the Chiefs did do it with Trey Smith. Now that was a medical thing, but getting a day 3 starting offensive lineman, though, that's a huge deal, right? It's one thing to draft one in the round 1. It's one thing to draft a starting offensive lineman even in day 2. But once you get into day 3, if you have a guy that earns that starting role over a competent enough player, right? Like the Bills need help at right guard. Ryan Bates is not a premier starter, right? But if he's your starting right guard, you don't, well, Bills fans might disagree, but you're not like, oh my God, this entire game is ruined because Ryan Bates is starting at right guard for us. So
yeah, he's fine.
But if you can get an improvement on that in day 3 from day 1, that goes a long way, and you're spending no money. You spent a low level of draft capital, and I think bolstering the offensive line for Josh Allen would help. It doesn't matter what position. I think right tackle and right guard are the 2 positions that you guys would be looking to replace, right? Yeah. So either one of those on day 3, specifically day 3, that's not fun to see a big rival go ahead and fill a role immediately then.
Very well said. Right tackle has been my biggest with where Spencer Brown is. He played 8-man football in high school, goes to the University of Northern Iowa, then sits out the COVID year and is extremely raw, high ceiling, and then gets thrust into action earlier than he should have his rookie year, has a bunch of injuries in the offseason and into training camp and throughout the year last year, and that affects his play and hurts his practice time and his reps and all of these things. But at the end of the day, right now, he's just a very mercurial right tackle, and I think that's a legitimate, I don't want to say hole because there's still like bodies there, but he's too much of a roller coaster at a premium position for an offense that has a legitimate top quarterback in the league that you want to protect and you need to give sustainability and consistency to. So right tackle for me is tops on that offensive line. I like the way you phrased it because granted you guys got Creed Humphrey on day 2, but if you get these like day 2 and especially day 3, if you can get like a quality starter anywhere in day 3, but especially an offensive lineman, like the value that you get from the combination of on-field production and play plus contract cost and monetary value, like good Lord, especially with what you're doing with the Chiefs, like where you've got money spent with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes and now with like guys like Jawan Taylor and, where your money is sunk in. You've got this really good offensive line and you've got a really cost-controlled, effective center in Creed Humphrey and a tremendously cost-controlled, effective guard in Trey Smith, who I remember yelling. Creed Humphrey was the big one, but I wanted Trey Smith so bad. And then it was, what was the heart issue, right? That drove him down draft boards?
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, like that's understandable. And he just kept falling. And I remember when the Chiefs got him, I just remember being like, he's going to end up being sweet because that's the world that I live in. And look what you got like on the interior. And if you can get, especially I like the way you phrased it, because it's not just, getting a solid starter on the offensive line or at like right tackle. Like if you get it on day 3, that also means you used your day 1 and your day 2 picks in other areas. And now you've got positional value at other spots. There's less opportunity cost that you've used. somebody who I had tabbed early. I like Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion, but now it seems like he's creeping up into the day 2 range. Like, say, I like Tyler Steen from Alabama, although maybe he's more guard tackle flex, but now he seems like he's creeping up into day 2. I think there's still maybe like Carter Warren from Pitt or McFadden from Clemson who offer you some tackle ability, but then there's guards as well. Like, but yeah, that's very well said. I like the specificity that day 3, because again, like you're getting what the Chiefs get. Again, I don't want to keep using the Chiefs as an example just because it's the low hanging fruit here. Like, if you have competent starters or plus starters on your offensive line that you got on day 3, you're paying like basically $5. Like, you're paying nothing for quality starters for at least 4 years. And then that allows you to put your money into other areas.
And you nailed it. Cause like, if this happens on day 3, that means you probably spent some of the earlier round picks on other positions. Right. And hitting on a day of any position on day 3 is going to be helpful, but offensive linemen are playing 100% of the snaps. If they're a starter, this guy is going to be on the field every single play, and all you invested is a 5th round pick, a 4th round pick, whatever it may be. That just goes such a long way. And I don't think you need studs on the offensive line. You just need solid, competent players. If you have enough of them next to each other on the offensive line, it can be with Josh Allen or a Mahomes or a good quarterback. It can be absolutely fine, and you can roll. And I love your list of day 3 tackles and linemen there. I think I would have named every single one of those guys as like guys that in that range that I would really not like to see the Bills get. Nick Saldiveri has been like a my guy for a while, and it's
nice.
Been awesome, but also stinks to see him. Like, I don't even know if the Chiefs would have a chance to draft him at 95. Like, even at 95, I think he might be pretty gone. It's like that's been not fun being on him pretty early, and then just seeing him climb. But I mean, good for him. Good for the Old Dominion guy.
Good for him. Yeah, bad for us. Jonathan Mingo was my guy for that. Like, going into the Senior Bowl week, I was like, you know what? This is a dude who I'd really like in the 4th round. Like, I think you could do some stuff with him, the size and the frame. And if his route running can be, coached up enough, because he comes from Ole Miss, which is so RPO based, yada, yada. And now here we are like 2 days before the draft, and everybody's like, could Jonathan Mingo go in the 1st round? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, is that where we are right now, that he's climbed up so much? And same, like, I remember doing mock drafts granted, not that mock drafts matter, but like killing time doing mock drafts in March or beginning of April. And I was always getting Saldiveri at like pick 137 for the Bills. And now it's like, nope, he's gone by like pick 92. And I'm like, oh, like, this sucks now.
Right.
Like, the way it just changes. It's
ruining our fun.
Times. No, it's ruining our fun. But again, good for them, I guess, for like their lives and making more money if they want to be selfish, but whatever.
If they want that.
Right. But I mean, who wants that? Does money really matter? Does money and like more success matter for anything? No, like, it's all nebulous.
Never.
Not in anything. All right, so we're through the first 3, bringing into the home stretch of the last 2. So the 4th ranked piece in terms of what you do not want to see the Buffalo Bills do if you are an opponent of the Buffalo Bills. What do you got?
So it's getting a little bit hard now to find stuff that I desperately don't want to see the Bills do. And that's not because, of hubris or anything like that. It's just like, I think those first 3 moves would make the Bills so much better that it would actively be like, this is scary now. These last 2 are a little bit more specific. And this would just be, I think this would be really cool. And if it works out perfectly, this would be really bad. So getting, and this doesn't have to be round 1, but hitting on a linebacker that has a Fred Warner-esque impact, right? And I'm not even going to attempt to come up with the player. Matt Milano's great. Matt Milano's a great linebacker. There's one linebacker in the NFL that when the Chiefs go to play, I'm like, please find him every single time, every single play. He's the only guy that matters, and that's Fred Warner when you play the 49ers. Just having that guy. And I think there's a couple other linebackers that have gotten a little bit closer to him lately, but I still don't think anyone impacts what or dictates what an offense can do quite the way he does. But if for whatever reason, if that's Drew Sanders, all of a sudden you can coach him up to have those level of instincts. If Diane Henley out of Washington State, who played wide receiver, shows that same kind of feel. It's not as big, but shows that same kind of feel and coverage. And all of a sudden that guy ends up on the Bills, then essentially every year when the Chiefs and Bills play, I have to worry about that guy in the middle of the field taking away whatever the Chiefs are trying to do, like Fred Warner frequently does for the Niners.
That obviously ties into a move that we saw in free agency with the Bills losing Tremaine Edmonds. Yeah. What were your thoughts on I don't think we ever really hit on him specifically in, doing Bills Chiefs previews. What was your thought of Tremaine Edmunds as a player in this Bills defense? Going into every Bills Chiefs week, and there were several these past couple of years, was he somebody that you thought of like, this guy's an impact player, or this guy makes plays? Was he somebody that kind of registered on your radar when you looked at the Bills defense, or did you just kind of think he was just a functional piece in the Bills defense?
It's so hard. When I watched the Bills defense leading up to the game, he's a very functional piece, and I think he played a very pivotal role, and he did make plays. Like, I will not say that he definitely made plays, but for the Chiefs specifically, I never felt his impact against the Chiefs.
Okay.
I never felt Edmonds' impact when playing against the Chiefs. And that doesn't mean he was bad. It's just the way the Chiefs play football. I feel like they put him in conflict a lot, and I don't know if that was his strength, was handling that kind of conflict. And that's the Andy Reid special, right? He's going to pick a couple guys. He's going to put them in conflict over and over and over again. And you're going to be wrong. It's just, how do you adapt to that? And I don't know if I ever felt like he was adapting to a way that it even became a second thought to the Chiefs. I think they were completely fine with however he reacted. They were going to get what they wanted. But again, I don't mean that he was bad by any stretch. It's just, I don't think the Chiefs were a good matchup for him in the iteration of the Bills defense.
My favorite play of his versus the Chiefs, I don't remember what game it was, but it's going to seem like so minor or so minuscule because it wasn't a splash play. It wasn't this huge impact play. Mecole Hardman ran a post as like the number 3 receiver, and Mecole Hardman is like fast as hell. And he ran this post like 20 yards downfield, was like splitting the safeties, and Edmonds carried him all the way downfield. And I was just like, that's impressive as hell that you just ran with just like 4-3 wide receiver. Like that's one of these plays that anytime anyone was like, well, he can't cover him. Like they were playing quarters, like they were matching, and he picked up Mecole Hardman and carried him. Like, and Mahomes looks at it and is like, nah, let me go somewhere else. I'm like, you got Mahomes to look off a 4-3 wide receiver against the linebacker. Like that's always this play that sticks in my mind. And it's funny now looking at that linebacker spot, like Edmonds showed up bigger this year in terms of making like box score plays and splash plays and all these, and having all these flash moments. But my biggest thing with him is I always thought he was just this large deterrent in the middle of the field. Like his athleticism, his size, his frame, like he squeezed windows and he made things tough in the middle of the field. And the Bills, as each year as he progressed in his career, like from an interior like a middle of the field pass coverage perspective, they went from like 19th in DVOA to 2nd in DVOA to 1st in DVOA. And granted, the safeties with Hyde and Poyer play a role in that as well, but he was such a deterrent in kind of closing off the middle of the field to so many teams. And he played such an important role in setting and allowing the Bills defense to play the coverages that they do, both in terms of the frequency and the variations that they played, and not having him, I think, like limits what they do. And linebacker is just, that's another, like the linebackers suck this year. No disrespect. These guys are obviously like really good football players. Like they're going to go to the NFL, yada, yada. But this is not the year to need a linebacker, like, especially for the kind of linebacker the Bills need. But to your point, yeah, I mean, if you can, Matt Milano's an example. They took Matt Milano in the 5th round, and now he's an all-pro linebacker. Like just what you can get, the juice you can get out of that spot, especially, given the need that they have for it. Very fair. Now,
yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. Like when I watched him back, is like I always thought that Edmonds got a little bit too much flack for not making the splashy plays that you would pick out like highlights and stuff. But it seemed like he was a pivotal part of what they tried to do on defense. The issue came when you went up against really good teams, not even just the Chiefs, just really good teams that they're not going to be afraid of the middle of the field just because Tremaine Edmonds there. They're not going to be afraid to find ways to attack him. So now he has to actively make those plays. And that's where I thought against the Chiefs specifically, he just was a lot more hit or miss with a lot more miss than hit in those situations. Not that he was bad, not that he had a negative impact on the defense. Just I think the Chiefs were one of the teams willing to challenge the space that he was occupying and deterring other people. And they were making a play. The Chiefs, you watch them play the 49ers, they mostly avoid Fred Warner, but they'll still challenge him too, right? And I think, like I said, I already think he's kind of the best he's the only linebacker that like registers on my radar, really. And like they still try to find ways to try to attack him. So that's not a knock on Edmonds. It's just that's what I noticed was anytime the Chiefs wanted to put him in conflict or go after him, they seemed to have success, but watching other teams, they didn't really try or have that same kind of success.
I think it's a fair point. And especially, given I mean, if you've got Mahomes and Reed and you're still challenging from time to time, and I'm in the same boat, like the best off-ball linebacker in football and Fred Warner, like everybody else is going to be a tier or two below him. So if they're still willing to attack the top tier guy, they're probably going to be able to, one, put into conflict the lower tier guys and probably attack the hell out of them as well. So that's a fair point. Matt, we're going to bring it home now. The fifth.
Oh, perfect
thing. I know, right? The last piece, the coup de grace. I think that's the right terminology I'm using here. Whatever.
Time to make everybody real mad here at this one.
Oh, now I'm excited. So what do you got for your last one here for the Buffalo Bills anti-wish list in terms of what you do not want to see them do if you are a Buffalo Bills opponent?
This one takes buy-in from the top down, right? This is more of a long play, but this is it. Bijan Robinson falls and the Bills take him.
Nice.
And then the Bills realize that maybe running Josh Allen isn't the move. They decide to, I don't know, maybe try to run the football using a really, really good running back that can make stuff happen to prolong not just Josh Allen's career, but how effective he is throughout the whole season. And Josh Allen, I already said it once, I love how he just throws the ball deeper than deep coverage. I think that's great. You know how that works really well? Off play action, or when you set it up by running the ball really well. So go ahead and get, if he's there, one of the better running back prospects in the past decade, slap him in there and make it work, figure it out. Maybe you need another next year's draft to get the offensive lineman you need to transition your style of offense. I don't think it's a knock whatsoever to change this to a little bit more of a running team than what they currently are, running with a running back team than they currently are. And I actually think it would go a long way with the Bills set of offense.
This has been such a powder keg of a conversation with anything for Bijan, and it's all tied to the positional value for people. I'm in the boat if he's there at 27. Well, one, for me, he's one of the blue chip elite dudes in this draft class, and there's not many. And I think he would be a blue chip elite prospect in almost any draft class that you put him in. Like, he's that good. The only way that he's going to be more of a generational or elite talent is if he ran like a 4.41 instead of a 4.46. Like he ticks like every single box in every way. And if he's there at 27, flat out, there's not going to be another player, like a better football player at 27 if he's there than Bijan Robinson. If he's there, he is the best football player on the board. And positional value, I said it on last week's show, like that's a whole nother conversation. If you don't believe a running back should go in the first round, and positional value and resource allocation, so on and so forth, and all these things. But at the end of the day, you're still adding like a truly elite talent to your offense. Is it a running back? Yes. Do you necessarily not want to use that in the first round? Maybe. But he's elite, and it's not just because this draft class is weaker. Like, he would be elite in any class, and I'm in a similar boat. Like, I've been clamoring this for the past couple of years. I know it's a pass first league, but you need to be able to run the ball. Like, you need that quality in your offensive line, or a running back that's good enough to elevate the O-line. And, here's a good example, right? What happened? Patrick Mahomes goes down against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They put in Chad Henne. What do they do when they come out in the second half? They run the ball down the Jags' throat. What happens in the Super Bowl when Mahomes dings up his ankle a little bit and they come out to start the second half? They run the ball down the Eagles' throat with that offensive line and Isaiah Pacheco. Yeah. Like, you need that pivot. This goes to my rock, paper, scissors, piece, right? You need to be able, what happens if you're playing a team that has stellar pass defense, but they're weak against the run? Cool. Let's pivot and run the ball. What happens if you're playing in a shitty weather game like you could everywhere in the AFC? Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, majority of the good teams in the AFC, besides maybe even like Miami, if you're going to Miami, like everyone's going to have bad weather in the playoffs. Yeah. You know what works in bad weather? Run the football. And then on top of it, you've got this elite player. That's music to my ears. I think it's very funny. Tying in with that, what is your overall thought on, I know at 27 for me, I feel like the positional value conversation should take a bit of a backseat because you're getting real close to the second round right there. You're at pick 27. If there's an elite dude and he's a running back, cool, take him. But what is your overall thoughts with taking a running back in the first round in today's NFL, given the positional value questions that surround it?
For someone like Bijan Robinson, once you hit pick like 12, I think the way the rookie pay scale breaks out, he's now no longer the highest paid running back. He's in like the top 5, top 7 or something like that. But guess what? He's also in the top 5 to 7 running backs in the NFL, I think, day one. Like, I think he's that good. Yeah. So at pick 27, I no qualms. I wouldn't push back whatsoever. the Chiefs just drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the end of round 1 a couple years ago. Not a great pick. It turned out even worse than we thought, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not anywhere close to the prospect that Bijan Robinson is. And even then, plenty of people, not just Chiefs fans, but plenty of people were trying to spin it that in that offense, he'll be fine. You were having to make the argument where how the situation was perfect. Bijan Robinson's situation is perfect for 32 teams. That's how good it is. He's perfect for 32 teams. And I think the Bills specifically are one team where Josh Allen is great. I think he's one of these really good one of these elite quarterbacks that maybe would benefit a little bit more from having the run the ball and create space for him to launch the football. I mean, like he has the best deep ball, or he is the most effective with the deep ball, right? In the NFL right now, create that space by running the ball more. Now the team has to buy in. You can't draft Bijan Robinson and still only give him 12 carries in a game over for 4 straight weeks. You can't do it. The team has to buy in, but I can miss me with running back value stuff once you start getting into the 20s, especially for a player like Bijan Robinson. And I would go as high as 12 for him.
Dude, he just, especially in today's NFL where, I mean, the Chiefs have seen it and the Bills have seen it. Oh, you've got this sick quarterback and this great passing game. Cool. We're going to play 2 high coverages with light boxes. Yeah. You know what gets teams out of 2 high coverages and light boxes? When you have a running game that makes them go, crap, we got to walk a safety down. Or you know what? We got to pull our nickel guy. We got to go more base and maybe respect this run a little bit.
Or eventually they won't. And it just matters when you have a running back that can make them pay. And there's a big difference between just breaking off a bunch of 4-yard runs. It's effective, but just running the ball for 4 yards all the way down the field, eventually, that margin of error we talked about at the beginning catches up and you're going to have a blown up play. Now your 4-yard runs don't matter. But with Bijan Robinson, those 4-yard runs are 6-7 yards, and he's more likely to break one than he is to get one blown up. So there's such a big gap there. So you want to play too high, or do you want to stop Bijan Robinson? It's I think it's incredibly scary. I think that's a terrifying thing. I'm also not 100% sure that the Bills would buy in on the run game based on what we've seen so far. So that's why it was at 5 and not number 1.
That's it. So if you knew the Bills would buy into the running game more, that would be your number 1.
Yeah, that would jump to number 1. And if he's there and that happened, that would jump to number 1. I don't know how you defend them, right? Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league, but he does not throw the ball downfield the way Josh Allen does. He does not in a game throw it down the field as far, as accurately, as efficiently as Josh Allen. So if you're going to make teams now have to decide between defending the line of scrimmage or defending deep, you're just giving space to one of those two things. And if the Bills will buy into that run game, that's going to be difficult. That's going to be really difficult to stop. This isn't like the Bengals. If the Bengals got Bijan Robinson, it'd still be good. But Joe Burrow, for a lot of the times when he's not throwing just go balls, he's trying to eat the ball short over the middle of the field. I just don't think it creates as much stretch as it would for the Bills. So yeah, that would jump to 1.
Bijan he takes those 2 and those runs that are blocked for 2 or 4, he turns them into 5 or 8, or can turn those 10-yard runs into 15 or 20-yard runs. And, even just tying it into the Chiefs, a team that I always thought had a really good blueprint for beating the Chiefs was the Baltimore Ravens, because their running attack is a unicorn, but also not only can you grind out yards and at that time run on the Chiefs, but what are you doing when you're running the ball? You're keeping the ball away from Patrick Mahomes, and you're keeping that Chiefs offense off the field. So now if you have a solid ground game led by a superstar running back in Bijan Robinson with an offense that has this tremendous downfield thrower in Josh Allen and this explosive passing offense, and now you also have the ability to grind teams and run on them and make them pay for giving you light boxers, or make them pay for showing 2 high looks or nickel coverages or so on and so forth, with a guy that can elevate an offensive line and make you pay up front. Yeah, that's a really dangerous potential concoction for I like that. I like where your head's at. One more question for you, and then we'll get you out.
Yeah.
The DeAndre Hopkins conversation, because he's been also rumored to the Chiefs as well. How much of a pendulum swinger do you think he is? If he goes to the Chiefs, if he goes to the Bills, how much does he change the AFC landscape? If he were to go to the Chiefs, how much further do you think he separates them from the rest of the pack? And if he were to go to the Bills, what do you think he does for the Bills in the AFC landscape?
I mean, I think he fills a role that both teams are kind of, I think, looking for, right? I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Bills fans or the Bills kind of want a second pass catcher that's a little bit more reliable, right? The Gabe Davis just wasn't that guy. So you need somebody else that can be paired with Stephon Diggs to get open and make plays when Diggs isn't getting it done. The Chiefs have the same thing, but with Travis Kelce and then nobody else, right? So I think both of these two teams vying for DeAndre Hopkins makes a ton of sense because he immediately fills one of their bigger roles on offense for both sides. I don't want to say like it's flipping what I think of either one of these two teams by itself, but it certainly closes the gap, however you want to go about it. Or if you want to have the Chiefs ahead or the Bills ahead, who that team would go a little bit more ahead. I don't know if it would be enough to flip them, right? Like I'm being very, all right, here it is. I think the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC. I think the Bills are second right now, right? Okay. People can be mad. I know Bills fans are probably mad at me about this, but that's where I don't think
Bills fans can be mad. Like I'm a wrestling guy, Ric Flair. To be the man, you got to beat the man. Like Chiefs are on top. That is fair. That's very fair.
No, I don't want to be. I was trying to beat around the bush, but no, we're going to go straight into this here. So Chiefs are 1, Bills are 2. If the Bills get DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think it makes them number 1, but it gets them closer. It now becomes like we can start having this conversation of, okay, how do the Chiefs go about beating the Bills now? Now it's a little bit more difficult for the Chiefs to beat the Bills because now you have to deal with a DeAndre Hopkins. And conversely, if the Chiefs get him, it gets a lot harder, I think, for the Bills to beat the Chiefs because now how are you going to stop Hopkins and Travis Kelce every essentially third down? One of those two guys is going to have a one-on-one matchup. Mahomes will be able to get them the football. And then the kicker to this is, I don't know what DeAndre Hopkins is going for, but looking at the trade market, it can't be that much. Like nobody's trading anything for these veterans. So either team would still have all their day 1 and day 2 picks to address other quote unquote needs or just add raw talent. Like I think that's even where the biggest boon is the Bills don't have to take Addison or Zay Flowers or whatever wide receiver. They solve that issue. Now it can be all about the or vice versa with the Chiefs. So I think getting Nuke matters more for these two teams than anybody else just because they're competing with one another.
Very well said. He's I really think he gets traded this week. I just don't know where and to who and for how much. I think a lot of it's going to depend on there's all the money stuff, like of how much Arizona's willing to eat or how much they're willing or what they really want. Like Arizona's such a
owner does not like to spend money.
No, and they're just so I hate like ragging on teams or dumping on teams, but Arizona is such a dumpster fire of an organization right now.
So bad.
Like from decision making and talent and player evaluation and draft pick selections. And now Budda Baker wants out, like, and you're going to lose a Hop potentially, like, and then they come out with these stupid uniforms that look just like the old uniforms. Like they didn't even change anything. Like, and they made this big announcement. It's the same uniform. It pissed me off so much. It was so dumb.
And Kyler's requesting draft picks publicly, and we're going. That place is, and your head coach is lying about things that never happened.
Yeah, with the whole like, oh yeah, they came to me and they were like, oh, we want you fired. And he was like, oh, I'm leading the league by 30 sacks. It's like you were never doing any of that. And
yeah, like that. That place is wild right now. And like I think people are expecting Arizona to eat some money, and I think that's reasonable to expect, but I don't think that they are going to. They would spend more cash trading him and having to eat salary than just cutting him post June 1st. Like that would cost the team more money. So are you sitting there? Is Bidwell going to sit there and say, hey, I'd rather gain a 5th round pick, but spend more cash? Or is he just gonna be like, nah, I'll gain nothing and save my cash? And like his history says he's going to keep his cash over gain that 5th round pick. That's just what he does.
And they're just like, no pun intended, like a wild card with what they do because of ownership, because of the mismanagement. And then you've got a new coaching staff in there as well. So that adds more variables to it. Like it just muddies the whole waters. And I really do think he gets dealt. I don't know to who or for what at this point. I don't know. I'm seeing some combo of like, I don't know. They eat some money and some team gives like a 4th or like a 3rd and a 5th. Or like, or maybe they eat a ton of the money and it's like, okay, give us a 2nd. Like, I think that's on the lower end of possibilities, but man, it's a name that continues to circulate amongst the Bills fan bases. And then of course, Hopkins is stoking those flames with that video last week with the emoji responses. And just, I'm like, dude, like you're playing the game so well right now. Like, you know what you're doing.
to his credit, he's been open. Like he can routinely says it's not about getting more money or money. He just wants to play for a
Yeah.
contender. And whether it's his agent, whether it's him, whether it's whoever, they have found a way to pit two contenders that are rivals, and the Chiefs and the Bills directly, and even the Ravens a little bit earlier on. But like they found a way to pit teams that were all kind of rivals against each other into the social media, I guess, frenzy. I have no idea what the actual teams think. If I know the Chiefs have a very hard line drawn in the sand and they will not cross it, no matter what you try to push them. Like Brett Veach has gotten pretty good at that. He'll find his price. Maybe it's an overpay. Maybe it's way under. And like they've missed out on free agents or deals because they just won't budge. But like he's got his hard line in the sand that if they're interested, he's already made. But Nuke has done a good job getting two very rival fan bases very riled up.
Yeah, you can imagine like the Bills and Chiefs organizations like in their war rooms being like, did you guys see that that social media post from that you saw that Instagram thing from DeAndre Hopkins? He gave us a smirk and like a positive emoji. Like I think he wants to come here. Like let's chase this. The Bills are similar to the Chiefs in that regard. Like Brandon Beane is very much like, we like you. Here's what we're willing to offer. If you don't want it, cool. And this is with in-house free agents as well. Like, here's what we're offering you. If you think you can do better, go test the open market and then come back to us and let us know. It's the same thing with incoming free agents. Like, here's what we're willing to give you. If you don't want it, cool, good luck and Godspeed. If you do, come aboard. We're not budging.
So that reminded me, I did want to ask you a quick question before we're done. Yeah. Speaking of social media stuff, last year, it kind of went viral for Chiefs fans, the Bills war room when the Chiefs traded up for Trent McDuffie, and how somber the war room kind of looked. Do you guys, as Bills fans, think the Bills were upset that the Chiefs jumped up for a Trent McDuffie at the cornerback position? The Bills quickly thereafter traded up and grabbed Keir Elam. So, like, what's Bills fans' read on that whole situation?
So this is actually super funny. I talked about this on our draft show last year and throughout the offseason. Brandon Beane, I forget exactly what he said, but Beane doesn't really, like, for guys that aren't Bills players, he doesn't really name drop anyone in any way for anything. And after the night one presser, he's talking about, why they traded up for Keir Elam and yada, yada. And he mentions McDuffie. And I forget the exact verbiage, but he mentioned it in a way that I immediately was like, they wanted Trent McDuffie. And I also think because you guys traded up for McDuffie, I think that kind of forced them a little bit to be like, all right, cool. Now we can't take any chances and we have to go get Keir Elam. I think they were going to go after Trent McDuffie. I know Elam from a size and frame and skill set perspective fits everything for the Buffalo Bills, right? I think the same can be said in some aspects for Trent McDuffie. And for me, Trent McDuffie was my corner 3 last year, and I loved him. And the only reason he wasn't corner 1 or corner 2 was because you had Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner, who were 2 like amazing corner prospects. I thought McDuffie was awesome. I was literally shouting from the rooftops all offseason that I wanted Trent McDuffie for the Bills. And then of course, the friggin' Chiefs jump up and take him. And I was
not even on the radar. The Chiefs traded up and we're sitting there live and we're all thinking Jermaine Johnson, Keir Elam wasn't even a thought because he fits what the Chiefs had done in the past. Right. And so it was just really, nobody had Trent McDuffie even remotely on their mind. And then they take Trent McDuffie and it's just like, okay. And then everyone's excited. Then you hear Brett Veach talk and it's like, hey, we didn't think he had any chance to be there. So we didn't plan on this. And then we made the move, which is good. It's just that video of the Bills war room while that was happening, Chiefs fans have decided the same thing that you were kind of alluding at, that the Bills might have wanted him. Cause that's what it looks like when you see the video. And I obviously have no information or inside info there. It looked like there was a little bit of a surprise and a little bit of a disappointment when that happened. So, hey, here's the hoping that maybe the Chiefs pull that off again.
You came in as a heel and you ended as a heel. And you know what? I'm trying to think of the line. What's the whole I don't agree with just what you say, but I'll defend to the death. You're right to say it, whatever that stupid line is. Yeah. But you, man, well played. Way to bring it all full circle. You, as I anticipated, as I hoped, were a tremendous guest in every which way, shape, and form tonight. Yeah, you're a good dude. And you know your shit when it comes to ball. I love having you on every single time. And like you mentioned offline and then on the show, and when we were DMing last week, you are enthralled with draft coverage for the Kansas City Chiefs just regularly at this time of year, but even more so because the draft is in Kansas City this year. So things are dialed up even further. Like I know you had some work earlier tonight. So one, I appreciate you as always. 2, I appreciate you taking time at such a busy time to join me and break down this, what I thought was a fun topic, and talk draft and talk ball and talk this rivalry a bit. And 3, just in case people don't know, let them know who you are, where they can find you, what you do, plug your stuff. The floor is yours. I still hate you, but well done.
That's fair. That's all fair. You can follow me on Twitter at Matty_KCSN. I work for KC Sports Network. We cover all Kansas City-based sports. I mostly cover football. Occasionally we'll talk about some college ball. Like Ant said here, I love college. I love the draft. I spend almost like 350 days of a year talking about the upcoming draft. So like I'll take a couple days off and come back, but you can find all the stuff at KC Sports Network. You can just kcsportsnetwork.com, kcsn.substack.com. Eventually I'll remember all my links. It's just all about Kansas City sports. If you ever need to know anything about the Chiefs, check out the YouTube channel. If you want to have a little bit of fun, right? If you want to, peek a peek at what the Chiefs are doing in the draft, round where the Chiefs come on the clock, if you go to the KCSN YouTube page, it's just KC Sports Network on YouTube, we'll be live covering the entire draft, top to bottom. It's obviously going to be Chiefs-centric, but you'll see our live reactions of what the Chiefs did. If it's a good pick, a bad pick, we'll tell you about it. I don't hold back if I think the Chiefs make a bad pick, so you can go back to your Bills fans and say, hey, the Chiefs guys think they made a terrible pick. So come check us out as the Chiefs are picking. You'll get, our general thoughts on that. And as always, man, I appreciate you for having me on. This is one of the few podcasts I make sure I have a chance to come on. I love hanging out. I love talking. And I like this topic a lot. This is a fun way to talk about the draft that I have not done yet this year, which is nice.
Thank you. I've got this show, and then I've got the Film Room show on Wednesdays at 7, and we're doing a wish list episode tomorrow. And all of a sudden it just clicked with me last week. I was like, oh, an anti-wish list episode would be fun, but I was just going to do it from like guys I don't want to see the Bills take or things. And I was like, well, what if we went further and made it like, an enemy type of thing or opponent type of thing? And I was like, Chiefs. And you were the first person I thought of. I've said it before when you've been on the show, and I'll say it again for the people in here. Like, I think it's whether you're just a Bills fan or a football fan in general, but even if you're a Bills fan, you always want to stay up on the news and analysis for every other team in the league, especially the ones that are your rivals, because those are your opponents. You need to stay well informed, and it's hard to find good objective analysis in general. And you and really the whole squad, Kent and your whole crew at KC Sports Network, like you guys do a great job covering the Chiefs and everything you do. It's good analysis. It's thoughtful. It's on point. It's accurate. And it's objective, even though you were mean to me when you first came in and on your way out. But, I respect it. I respect your grind. I respect the hat and the shirt and the little Chiefs helmet in the corner. You did your thing. You were awesome. Again, I appreciate the hell out of you. Godspeed. Rest the voice as you kind of go through the gauntlet the rest of this week, man. I know I'll see you on Twitter in the DMs, and Godspeed. And I appreciate you as always.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too.
Later, buddy.
Later. Man, Matt is awesome. He's genuinely one of my favorite guests that I have on the show. I know I mentioned it earlier, but dude covers the Chiefs in a really objective way, breaks down film, breaks down tape. He knows concepts. He makes the videos that I make, or you'll see Eric make, where, he's breaking down concepts and schemes and why this play worked against this team and so on and so forth. Just a really good dude, doing a really good job covering ball. Speaking of really good dudes and people who are good at their jobs, let's bring up the sponsor, One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go and check out One Pie Pizza. They make their own homemade blue cheese, which is amazing. A delicious sweet sauce pie. It's not too saucy or messy. There's a great cheese to sauce ratio. They have a great pepperoni. All their toppings are great. One of the examples I always use, like if you get like peppers and onions and mushrooms, it's not just like whole pieces dropped onto the pizza. Like they chop it all up perfectly and then sprinkle it on the pizza. So like every bite gets you an even amount of toppings. They just really make really great food and great pizza. And they also do a lot of good with all the different drives and initiatives they do in the community, whether it's with the Alzheimer's Foundation or partnering with Roswell or the SPCA, Toys for Tots. They just do a lot of great things for the community in the city of Buffalo, in addition to making a tremendous product with their pizza. So go check out the online menu, again, in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. For those of you still riding with us or just joining us, like DF Forever comes in and he says, sup, and he says, sorry I missed the show. It's okay. We're still rolling for a little bit here. If you're still here or just coming in now, whatever have you, we got a decent amount of heads in here. Please drop a like on this video if you have not already. Likes go a long way towards helping this show, this channel, video, everything to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. It affects the algorithm and kind of jacks things up a little bit even further. So please, 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 and thank you. If you have not already, please drop a like on this video. Also, as we're starting to wind down here, what do you have on your anti-wish list? For those of you riding with me live here on the episode, is there a position you don't want to see? Is there a player you do not want to see? Is there something specific that you don't want to see happen for or to the Bills? It could be non-Bills related. It could be, I really don't want the Chiefs to get this guy. I don't want the Bengals to get this guy. Or maybe it is Bill specific. Whatever you got, start throwing it up into the chat now. We'll start to, read some things and bring some things up as we go forward a little bit here and start to wind down here in the end of the episode. I know some things can be, varying when it comes to the likes, depending on where you are. But as NFL Draft Fanatic says, there's 94 watching. There's only 47 likes. Let's get some more likes if you folks would be so kind. Please, 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 and thank you. Jack that up. I know it's corny to ask for that, but it goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team. So please, 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 and thank you. I like this comment from NFL Draft Fanatic. Says, I don't want Buffalo to draft bad players. Absolutely. You only want to draft good players. I know it can be confusing sometimes, but you only want good players. Ooh, Bills Mafia STF comes in and says, I don't want to see Siaki Ika for any pick. Not a fan of Ika. Ooh, and RJ says, outside of Bijan, no running back. So RJ's cool with just James Cook, Damian Harris, and Naheem Hines. Nikki says, doesn't want JSN or Jack Campbell to the Chiefs. Ooh, interesting. Morning Mayan. What's up, Morning Mayan? She says, I don't want the Chiefs to get D-Hop. Yeah. Proven player. We'll see what he has left in the tank, but especially with what the Chiefs already have with Mahomes and Kelsey and Andy Reid, like adding another potential chip or weapon like that. Oof. Scary. Oh, interesting. Brian says, I really don't want Flowers. Interesting. Zay Flowers has been such a fan favorite for a lot of Bills fans. I'm interested to see, Brian, why you don't want Zay Flowers. Very fair. I like Zay Flowers, for the record. I do think he's not the separator underneath that the Bills potentially may need, especially against man. A lot of times where he wins, it's due to his athleticism, and when he faces opponents of a higher tier athleticism or closer to his level of athleticism, like when he matched up against Florida State. Granted, Boston College's offense schematically and from a talent perspective was not good for Zay Flowers, but I think he tends to struggle with guys that have more athleticism closer to his level or above him, like he'll see in the NFL. So I don't think he's just going to be this dominant stud right away, but I do like Zay Flowers. So it's interesting that you're not a fan. DF says, ooh, no edge in round 1. Shane says no DB in any round. Oh, you do want a DB in any round? No DB in any round. Jim says, oh, does not want to trade up. I think that's fair. I wouldn't mind a trade up for certain players. Like, again, I really don't want to trade up either, but if Peter Skoronski were to fall, myself and Eric Turner were talking about this earlier tonight, like if Peter Skoronski were to fall, I wouldn't mind trading up for Peter Skoronski because he's fantastic, but fair. Ooh, Song comes in and in all caps with 4 exclamation points says, I don't want Addison because he's too small. He's such a good polished route runner though. But I understand the size concerns, under what are we at? Let me check here. I know it's 173 pounds. Where's my notes? Yeah, 6 foot, 175. He's skinny, small frame. Fair. Ooh, Justin Phillips says, absolutely don't draft the TCU wide receiver, Quentin Johnston, and please no Jahmyr Gibbs in the first. I don't think there's danger of Gibbs going in the first to the Bills. I do like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot. His speed is real. His feet, his vision, his suddenness in the hole, and his ability to see, find, go, and separate. Like, he is a walking home run hitter waiting to happen. He's also good in the route distribution. Like, he's that guy in those Texas routes, those angle routes that he just makes linebackers look foolish. You can run him on a drag route, from a spread alignment, and if you get him the ball on the move, watch out, look out. Daryl says no running backs. Roy says, very simply, I want the Bills to actually let their rookies contribute more. That's fair. No, I like this comment from Nikki. Nikki says, I don't want another bull edge rusher. If we do, give us some bend so Vaughn can mentor. That's a piece, I've talked about it on the show all offseason. Like the Bills the Bills' archetype for edge, aside from Von Miller, has been compress the pocket, big, long, strong kind of guys, not very bendy, not overly athletic. Von Miller is very much the antithesis of the archetype that they use on the edge. I would like guys with more bend, with more athleticism, with more dip to their game, but it's not something we've seen with regularity. Like honestly, if they go edge in this draft, I would think it'd be somebody like Zach Harrison from Ohio State, or like the most bendy kind of guy who isn't even really a bendy guy would be like Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. Like they just traditionally have not gone for those bendy type of edges, but fair. Dennis says, I think KC is more tolerable than New England because it's a genuine rivalry. I just don't want to see KC pick one of our guys again. I think that's fair. NFL Draft Fanatic says, I would prefer no round 1 wide receiver unless they decide Downs is a round 1 pick. I prefer Downs in round 2 over any of the round 1 guys. I think Josh Downs would be an absolutely tremendous fit for the Buffalo Bills. I do have a round 2 grade on him. I would love him in round 2, especially at 59. But I mean, if the Bills were to trade back, he's somebody who I'd love in the late 30s, early 40s, depending on what, where they trade back to and how that shakes out. I wouldn't hate it in round 1. I would prefer it in round 2, but I mean, he adds a lot of juice to that slot position with his craftiness, his route running nuance, how he paces his routes, his understanding of leverage and coverage and space. I also think he plays bigger at the catch point than he gets credit for. He's one of the best in college football last year in contested catches, 13 out of 18. I forget where it placed him, but he was one of the best at contested catches, which again is really saying a lot considering his size. At 5'10", 175 pounds, dude plays bigger that he is. Oh, Elshar says, I want Hopkins and Flowers. Ooh, very interesting. Very interesting. Oh, I appreciate you, Anthony. Anthony says, it's definitely not corny to remind people to hit the like. I appreciate you. You also have a tremendous name, and I'm not just saying that because we share it. Well done. Well done. Anything. Oh, DF says, the only slot guy I will take is Josh Downs. What else? Oh, Amicus comes in. I'm seeing a lot. I see trade stuff in this comment, so I pulled it up. Amicus says the Bills need to trade Oliver in a 5th for Hopkins. Then if Njigba or Bijan isn't at 27, trade back to 32 for Mozzie Smith, then trade up to 42 for Campbell and Sanders. A lot of variables there, but I don't hate the plan. Oh, I appreciate you, Dennis. Dennis says he loves the vibe at the end of the show. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Ooh, Dan King Kit comes in and says, trade for Judy. Jerry Judy's a really interesting one, right? I think he still has some of his ceiling that he can hit and potential to hit. Denver has been not kind to him his first several years. I think he's a guy that could still, reach some of the levels that he was projected to reach coming out of the draft several years ago. I think he's a really good route runner. I think he's got juice to his game. He's got enough size. Like, you put him in this offense with Stephon Diggs, with Gabriel Davis, and then you also had the youth factor on his side, right? Like, if he works out, he's a guy who you could potentially lock up long-term and help yourself out that wide receiver position too. I think he's got high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 potential still, despite the struggles he's had on early on. So I think that's very fair. Walter says, unless you think a guy has wide receiver 1 potential, I feel like drafting a wide receiver in the first round isn't optimal, especially in a draft class like this with little separation. That's been my biggest thing with this wide receiver class and my desire to not go wide receiver in round 1. I think the drop off from whoever you have as your, top 3 or 4 wide receivers in this class, like, I don't think the drop off is as big from wide receiver 4 to like wide receiver 8 or 9 or 10 as it is from edge 1 through 4 to edge 10, or defensive tackle 1 through 4 to 10, or offensive tackle 1 through 4 to 10. Like, I think there's a larger positional cliff that exists at other position groups than at wide receiver. I think a lot of the value at wide receiver in this class is going to be found in rounds 2, 3, and 4, depending on how the board shakes out. I think Jax is a bit of a different case study for me with the Bills because of how much they rely on the slot and how proficient he is at the slot. Similar with Josh Downs. Again, I don't want Josh Downs in the first. I would be okay with Jax there, but given what the Bills do and need from that slot position, if one of them were to be the guy in round one, I wouldn't absolutely hate it. Same thing with Addison. Like, I think I would like a round one wide receiver to have wide receiver one potential, but depending on your offense and how prevalent 11 personnel is and how much you rely on a slot receiver or a specific skill set in your offense to succeed, I think you can make the case to shift a little bit there. But I understand where your head is at, and I don't completely disagree. Morning Mine shouting out the tree. Absolutely. The tree is looking beautiful. I will be changing the garland live for this Thursday on the draft show and on Friday as we start to shift to a draft miss celebration, but very fair. Oh, Claude comes in and says there are a bunch of good slots: Flowers, Downs, and Jaden Reed from Michigan State. Charlie Jones, like them all, but the Bills need an X. Tillman or Wilson would fit, but the Bills don't seem interested. I think a lot of it depends on what you're going to do with Khalil Shakir. If you think he can work on the boundary, you're going to look more for the slot. If you think he can work in the slot, you're going to look more to the boundary. But very fair. Very fair. I like this from RT at the Mississippi Sports Group, who says, I'd love to have Josh Downs, but in the second round, I say our first pick should be the best defensive lineman available in round one. I think the trenches need work, especially on the defensive side of the ball, from a depth perspective, but also from a high-end perspective, like especially on the interior. I'm going to say just kind of one more time before we go into the draft. Right now, your top four defensive tackles are Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, and Tim Settle. Jordan Phillips has legitimate injury concerns. I don't think he can stay healthy for a full year. Tim Settle had a horrible year last year from an advanced metric perspective, and everything after them, we're at 5 through 8 on the depth chart, are even bigger question marks. You need top end talent in your defensive tackle grouping and depth for this year. And also you have no defensive tackle signed for 2024. So you need reinforcements for 2023 and beyond. The edge grouping, is Von Miller going to miss time? Even if he doesn't, you still need production off the edge. Boogie Basham shouldn't really be an edge number 3, maybe not even an edge 4. Epinesa is built more to be an edge 4, not necessarily an edge 3 as of right now. You need reinforcements there. A lot of potential consternation and conversation when it comes to that defensive line grouping, which is a piece that I do think the Buffalo Bills do need support in. I'm going to throw up the banner as we start to wind down here. I want to thank everybody who joined me live here on this episode. I love the engagement. I love seeing the live viewers come in. I love the questions, the back and forth, the comments, concerns, the back and forth with one another, the back and forth with myself and whoever the guest is, the appreciation for the guest. So thank you to everyone who joined me live here on this episode. If you are still here, please, and thank you, whether here live or watching later, please drop a like on this video before you leave live here on this episode. So thank you to everyone who rode with me live here on this episode. Thank you very much to Matt Lane from the KC Sports Network. Give him a follow on the old Twitter at Matty_KCSN. Dude is absolutely tremendous, does great work. Really objective analysis, knows ball, knows X's and O's, prospect evaluation, like actual ball in the NFL and college level. So give him a follow. And again, big ups and shout out to him for joining me on this episode. Thank you very much to everyone who didn't join me live on this episode. If you are watching later on YouTube or listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that is very cool. It's very much appreciated as well. Please drop a like here on YouTube if you are watching later. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe, whether on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever have you. Ratings and reviews go a long way, as do subscriptions. If you are here on YouTube, please subscribe to the Disguise Coverage channel or the Cover One channel or the Cover One channel as a whole. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show. Word of mouth is always tremendously appreciated. If you thought this show was terrible, that's fine. Tell your enemies about this show and try and ruin their day with this show. Again, whether you join me live, watching this later, listening later, whatever have you, I appreciate you folks falling apart. It's only Tuesday and I'm falling apart. I appreciate you folks more than you know. I see a lot of the kind words coming into the chat. Thank you very much for those. I greatly appreciate it. Please drop a like on this video. Again, it goes a long way. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza if you live in the Buffalo area. The online menu can be found in the episode show notes. We got you covered here on the network for draft coverage. Join us live Thursday night for a live draft coverage grouping for the entirety of night 1. Join us again for live coverage for all of night 2. We've also got coverage on day 3. Myself and Greg Tomset will be live after night 1, after night 2, and after day 3 of the draft to go over some high-level analysis of who the Buffalo Bills picked. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro_ANT. I'm going to be breaking down film and showing clips and everything as this week goes by of whoever the Buffalo Bills picked and really breaking down and doing analysis there. So myself and the entire team will have you covered for everything and anything you need to know when it comes to whoever the Buffalo Bills pick this week and how the draft coverage goes. Man. Oh, this is a funny comment. Wilder says, as your enemy, I love this show. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was good. Whew. It's here. I feel like we were just talking Bills-Bengals after the Bills lost. I feel like I was just at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama in February, and out of nowhere, here we are. And it's draft week. 2 days from now, the NFL draft will be live. Join us here on the channel. Appreciate you folks. Oh, I like that comment from Dennis who says, stay drafting, my friend. You too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the kind words. Again, please drop a like on this video. Tell your family and friends and loved ones. I appreciate you folks. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, be kind to one another, take care of one another, look after each other. Have a good week. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Having a good week as a whole. Hopefully I'll see you for the live. I will be live on the Cover One channel Thursday night for draft coverage, Friday night for night 2 of draft coverage. Yeah. And then doing the live post shows after night 1, night 2, and day 3 here on the Cover One channel as well. So for those of you who enjoy my content, you'll be seeing a ton of me this week. For those of you who hate me and or my content, get ready for a horrible week because I'm going to be everywhere. Godspeed. I will see you tomorrow for another live episode of the Cover One Film Room. I'll see you for the entirety of the rest of this week with everything I got going on. And then, of course, I'll see you live next Tuesday for another episode of Disguised Coverage. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.